more about content. Obviously, as SMEs, we do not have, a huge amount of resources to put into our content. So I know that you've all been working on your content strategy, but I just wanted to double down on a couple of the elements of the content strategy, just to make sure that we're all being as efficient as we possibly can, because obviously time spent on content means that we can't be doing other things in our business. So this is basically what we're going to be talking about today. So just basically a marketing matrix, a framework for small medium business success, because as we've said before, we don't have unlimited budgets, and we need to make sure that we're putting in effort where we're going to get kind of maximum reward. Then we're just going to talk about building a sustainable content strategy, as Shri mentioned last week, and we have spoken about before on the course. It really is about having the discipline of doing it every single day. So how do we put together, a strategy for ensuring that we can do that in a way that, is scalable and kind of makes sense? And then finally, we're going to be looking at, maximum impact with the limited resources that we have. I'm assuming that everybody on this call is in the same situation as myself, the growth engineering team, and the Iridescent team, in the fact that we can't just go, okay, here's a couple of million quid to put into Google AdWords and Facebook, etc. So yeah, it's very much about ensuring that our dollar goes as far as it possibly can. Okay, so again, it always comes down to the power of your why. And, I'm assuming, because I've been banging on about the power of your why pretty much on every single call we've had, you're getting the feeling of how important this why is, because ultimately it will guide everything that you do in terms of your content calendar, but also, your voice. Okay. So again, the power of your why, your personal why, but also the power of your organizational why will allow you to ensure that all of your content basically has a kind of authentic note to it. And this authenticity is something that large companies can't necessarily compete with, right? So it's a really, really good way of differentiating, large marketing budgets from kind of authentic content. And we're lucky enough at the moment that this idea of authentic content, personalized content, is really taking over on the internet anyway. So, it all sort of aligns perfectly in terms of, where we are now and what kind of trends are driving, marketing. So what we're hoping is that you are going to have a very clear and distinct why, and your customers, that will resonate with your customers, because they will have those same values, those same interests, in order for you to match their needs and your specification, your what you're passionate about and what they're interested in, right? And then ultimately what you're trying to do with your overall strategy is create a community. Okay, so the end goal is to create a community of passionate advocates for your brand and services. Okay, so yes, it's about converting, but we need to see the whole circle, right? Not only in terms of lead generation into customer, into satisfied customer, but we have to look at that advocacy bit. And in order to do that, we are talking about a community. So when you think about your content calendar, think about how you create a community of passionate advocates, okay? Because it's more than just drip, drip, drip content. The ultimate goal here is, a community of passionate advocates that are going to allow them to basically promote your brand. Okay, so don't think of your content calendar. Content calendar is part of your overall kind of communication strategy. Ultimately, what you're trying to deliver is this community, right? Because if you can have a strong, solid community in and around your voice that is distinctive and your brand that is distinctive, they will allow you to make sales and basically do a lot of advocacy on your part. So really think about it as that full circle we were talking about last week, all the way back to advocacy. And the only way to deliver that, as I say, is community, right? Which means you've got to have engagement on your posts. So let's just kind of talk about the type of content that you might be pushing out in your content roadmap, because not everybody is really good at all this type of content, and you don't need to be, good at every single type, but you do need to really understand the different types of content that, are available, to you, right? So if we just start on, education. So definitely this is something that we do a lot of at Growth Engineering. And the more of a subject matter expert you are, the easier it is to do this kind of educational content. This is certainly, an area which I really, really enjoy, because it's just a subject area that I'm really passionate about. So what's really interesting is if you push out a lot of educational content, right, that does deliver a lot of trust in your customers. And so therefore, they want to talk to you when it comes to the sales process. They are interested in speaking to you specifically because of the fact that, you are very kind of knowledgeable. So if you take it from the kind of education into the sales process, what you will find is that if you do post a lot of education content, people will have, to a certain extent, already made up their mind that they want to do business with you because of your of your knowledge of the subject. So we get two types of sort of inbound leads at Growth Engineering. One is very much, we just want to do business with you because I know that you really do know this subject better than anybody else out in the market. And the other is, can you come and speak? So can you come and speak to, the global Coca-Cola team? Can you come and speak, at whatever conference it might be? And again, that's really, really useful. So what you want to do with educational content is obviously ensure that it is of a high quality, right? That's the first thing. So, don't say things that other people already know. You really need to look at the intersections between what's happening out there and something else. So at the moment, my focus is very much looking at what is happening in neuroscience in terms of the way the brain works, but also what's happening in AI. So, try and find intersections where you can educate, right? Because those are the things that are most interesting. And of course, you've got, if you think about, Venn diagrams, you've got people who are interested in AI and the people who are in neuroscience, right? So you've got two people that might be interested in your content. So education content, if that is if you're, inclined, then, how-to guides, industry insights, expert interviews are all really good ways of doing that. And remember, this doesn't have to be content you push out yourself. Jared and I were having a fantastic conversation on Friday, and we were like, oh my God, we're interested in the same things. We should totally do a podcast. And again, it's not all of coming from one individual. It's two individuals that are passionate about the same subject coming together and discussing. So, do think about how you can, not put all of the responsibility for content on you. But again, these expert interviews are very interested. People are interested in those things. And so, the geek out thing is a good way to start. So certainly education is something I'm very comfortable with. Not so comfortable with the entertaining side of things, but luckily Billy is very good at that. So day in the life types of things, team spotlights, user generated content. You might have somebody in your team that can basically do that, or you might just focus in on that, the entertainment side. Again, we don't do a lot of it in Growth Engineering, so I don't have a lot of experience in that kind of entertainment content, but clearly there are many organizations that build a really fun, engaging brand based on entertainment type content. Then we're moving over here into sort of converting that into actually building businesses. Okay, so once we've hooked them in, either because they really think we're exciting and fun and we're entertaining them, or they think we're insightful and we know our stuff, we're then going to be having to convert that into sales. So we need to think about content which is product specific. So this would be product videos, really just linear features of the product, right? And obviously ideal content for our websites as well. But here we want to be talking about product demonstrations. Again, we can do that ourselves. We can get a third party to do it ourselves, or even better, we can get a customer to do the demonstrations. I mean, those are obviously the best we can get. So those conversion and feature type content is very much part of the mix. They need to know what they're going to get and how, what that process is like. And again, customers do a really good job of testimonials in that regard. And then finally, it's kind of inspiring our customers about the art of what's possible, right? So once we've done the kind of like product demonstrations, what we want to do is inspire them with, stories of success. And so this is particularly good, let's say if you're winning awards, or, you want customers to be sharing, what they've learned. So this is basically inspiring other people from the work that you have done. Okay. Now, it's really, really important that you think about all these different types of content in your content roadmap. So when I reflect on this, I know that me personally, I've done a lot of the education type stuff, but maybe I haven't done quite as much of the inspire, the case studies that I could have, because our customers are genuinely very, very proud of the work that we have done, but we don't get them talking enough about the value of that work. So for me, just looking at those content types, I've definitely realized that there are gaps and some low-hanging fruit where myself and the different teams could basically improve the content in all of those areas. I think we're heavy in education, maybe not some of the other areas. Okay, so in terms of just the channel, so we've had a lot of questions on this chat about, what channel should we use? And I think where we were last week is there aren't any definitive rules on what are the best channels. But on reflection and, talking with Claude, it was very clear. Now, I know I've said this before, but the guy who robbed the bank, and then the police guys were like, "Why did you rob a bank?" And then the robber said, "Well, that's where the money is." It's the same thing, turns out, in social media. You really do. First rule number one is, where is your audience? And when I reflect back on this, LinkedIn has been solidly good for us because obviously we're a B2B play. And so now we're coming into the B2C market. You can see why, TikTok and, Instagram and some of the other social media channels may be, as relevant. But really, I know it sounds really obvious, but it wasn't, obvious, to me necessarily last week. The best place to go is the place that your customers are going to expect you to be, right? So that is, for us, absolutely, that would be LinkedIn. And then if for a business consumer product, it would obviously be some of the other channels. The next thing to consider, and I think Sri, spoke about this, very well last week, was, lean into the channels you're already using. So, if you don't feel, I've never really felt comfortable with Facebook. I've never really felt comfortable with Instagram. I find it really, really, negative and a bit intense, so I just don't use those platforms. So it was a natural thing for me to start using TikTok because I just didn't like the other platforms. So I think that's also an insight that when thinking about where you should go. So first of all, go where your audience is. That is your true North Star. And then secondly, build on what you already enjoy. So if you enjoy Instagram, I know Sam does a lot of Instagram and really enjoys it, just lean into that. So first go where your audience is, then go where you're comfortable. And then the final thing is that the most important thing is consistency. So don't start what you can't finish. So, if you think that you're only going to be able to post, once a week, or whatever it is, once a month, just make sure that you start getting the discipline of doing that, because you've got to start somewhere. Consistency with social media is arguably more important than quality. You really do. Yes, Sri. Let's have a comment from you. Would love to hear.
Yeah. See, thanks. So I have a query regarding this. Okay. So as much as I have been successful as an individual influencer, on Facebook. Yeah, like you said, I have never been very comfortable with Instagram. I work on Facebook primarily. I am very comfortable because Facebook is largely a text-based area. And recently, last couple of years, we have moved into a video zone. And the video also, I'm okay to do it, but Twitter, yes, but not on Instagram. But what I had a problem with is that I also tried to start this social media campaign for pedestrians in terms of like this content one. I couldn't focus on what actually to whether it is, because as much as I'm comfortable in text area, I know that I can't write pages after pages of blogs on the Pegasus page, because nobody's going to read text heavy content. So or whether to put just a poster with some graphic poster with some images or something, or whether it has to be a video, because video is going to take effort and money. So that has been a kind of a confusion. And then because of these confusions, Pegasus campaign has been a kind of a non-starter. We started and we dropped, and we resumed again, we dropped. So it's been a very erratic one. So as much as I'm very successful as an individual, and I'm a failure when it comes to the organization. So that's a kind of a very ironic stage. I thought we'll have some insights on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of interesting because when I look at my LinkedIn, I do a lot of long form. I do a lot of long form because I'm just interested in the detail. And I think the people that are following me and are looking at my posts are also interested in the long form. Now, whether they look at it or not, well, they clearly do look at it, because obviously that's why, you know, I've got the following on LinkedIn. However, I don't always get the engagement. I do get a lot of people, you know, wanting to talk to me and sending me messages and basically asking me to speak. So somebody somewhere out there is, but often, you know, I might get 1 or 2 comments, but not massive amounts of comments. But I think that goes back to one of the slides we will come to, which is I'm not responding to people's posts. So if I'm not going out there and basically commenting and responding to people's posts, my long form content might not get comments and posts. But I don't think that the long form content that I'm doing on LinkedIn is necessarily bad. I think if you are interested in that intellectual side of stuff, then I think it's absolutely, it does work. I mean, clearly it does work because I've got a, you know, big following on LinkedIn. So I think what I would do is I would think really solidly about Pegasus is why, like what makes you so cool and, you know, interesting to work with. And then I would try, and if there isn't any kind of educational content in and around that move to, you know, the, you know, the entertainment side of it. But, you know, either which way, I think you've got to lean into what you enjoy doing. So if you enjoy doing long form content, ultimately, you're more likely to actually deliver on it. Because remember, we are SMEs. So if we're constantly trying to do things that we don't, is not natural to us, then it's not going to work so much. Is the way I would look at it. But has anybody else got any thoughts on Shree's comment? So yeah, overall, okay. I would just lean into what you naturally do. I would say, because it's just easier. It's easier. I'm not a funny person. For me, doing funny videos, they're just terrible. They're just very, very bad. You know, they're just bad, and they're certainly not entertaining at all. Okay, so just in terms of the bleedingly obvious, so let's just take an example of Gerard and I are going to do an hour's podcast on the theory of learning and how that, you know, how AI is going to affect, you know, how people are going to learn in the next 10 years, right? And that's probably going to be a piece of, we're going to organize what we're going to talk about. Then we're going to jump on something like this, you know, a Google Meet. And then what we're going to need to do is get that content stretched out. Okay, so he's going to be posting the content. I'm going to be posting the content. We'll probably upload that content into YouTube, and then basically we'll cut that into a series of shorts, which we'll put out on other on other medium like LinkedIn. So this whole idea of content repurposing is really important when you're in SME. So you want to do, you want to maximize your content in every single which way you can. So, for the purpose of, let's say, white papers, and I know Harry does this really well. We've started doing this in Iridescent as well. So you have one big white paper, and then you have a shorter series of blogs, which might drive traffic to the one big white paper, right? But obviously the one big white paper has a lot of kudos because it took you a lot of time to read. White paper is typically, 3,500 words. And certainly in terms of what Growth Engineering does, it's branded up beautifully. It looks stunning, but it's taken a lot of time to do. But what you want to be doing is one core piece of content, and then basically doing multiple shorter pieces of content to drive the consumption of the longer piece of content. So you're doing the same amount of work, you're just using it in multiple different ways. So this content repurposing is really, really, really important in terms of time saving. Okay, so this is basically the kind of 5-3-2 rule, which again should really allow you to deliver on your content strategy. Okay, so the 5-3-2 rule is, first of all, 50% shared content. Okay, so 50% content takes the onus off you. It means that you only have to do 50% of the work, right? Because 50% is being done on a shared basis. So what I mean by that is sharing industry articles, doing joint industry articles. That's another really good way of doing it. There's a big thing at the moment where authors are getting together with other authors and producing, ebooks and things like that, where you just do one chapter, but you put it through your socials. So you're known as an author, but so are the other 10 people that are doing books as well. So really just try and, share as much content as you can. The other thing is reposting and commenting on other people's articles. So again, this is something that I don't do particularly well, but absolutely vitally important if you want to build community. You're just never going to get there if you don't respond to other people's articles. So when you think about your social media and your content calendar, 50% of it should be commenting on what other people are doing and, creating content with them. Generally, just doing 50% of your time on shared and commenting on other people's posts, right? Particularly, you want to look out for the big movers and shakers, right? It's obvious in your industry who are the big movers and shakers. The sooner you can basically start posting on their specific feeds, particularly if you can bring some insight to their posts. And again, copy and paste it into Claude or whatever AI you're using. Give me an interesting perspective from XYZ, whatever. And, you can get that comment back. So you don't need to make it really brutal, but you do need to make sure that you're lasering in on people that in your industry are the movers and shakers. You need to be recognized. So that's definitely a learning and something that I need to be doing. Set aside time to basically respond to the biggest movers and shakers so that people know even more about who I am and what I stand for. So resharing community posts is obviously a big thing. People love being loved, so that is also should come into your content strategy. And the more you can do of this, remember, the less you actually have to do yourself. So that's why you start with 50% of your activity is basically shared content. Then 30% would be content that you create yourself. So this is your own blogs, original photos, product updates, whatever, how-to guides. And then, for the purpose of this, it's behind the scenes stuff, right? So you could look at, created content as your educational content. And then maybe your, behind the scenes, the 20% is basically, the entertainment content, which can be a bit more funny. So hopefully that gives you kind of a good idea of recommendations for what you should be doing. And certainly when I look at that, I know where I am not doing as well as I could. And ultimately, because I'm not doing so much of the 50%, that does impact my ability to get advocates and also build a community. So it's important to think about how you're structuring what you're doing in terms of your content, as well as the actual content itself. Just going back to how we do the 5, okay, so the 50%. The real golden stuff here is the community driven content. But obviously, if you've never really done a lot of that 5%, sorry, that 5 or that 50%, you're going to struggle to get the community going. So it is a warm up. So I think last Thursday we were talking about how you warm up your advocacy element of what you do. It's not a, okay, tomorrow let's get a whole load of customers basically doing, you know, customer spotlights for us. It might take you a couple of months to warm them up using that advocacy circle that we went through last week. But ultimately, you do need to get there. So thinking about how you do that in a really determined fashion. So every single month, I'm going to have one, or in our case of Zabmo, every single week, you know, or every single day, we're going to have one. How do we get that? So that those customer spotlights are really, really important. And we can facilitate that, you know, as we were saying the last week, we can facilitate those spotlights, and it can be in any area of our business. It doesn't need to be, you know, it can be a technical deep dive. It can be, you know, a user deep dive. It can be a support function deep dive. It doesn't really matter where it is, as long as, you know, we're highlighting customers. And remember, if we do it right, you know, as in, you know, what we were talking about last week, customers want to do this. We just need to bring them through that educational process so that they will be really happy to collaborate on joint content with us. The other thing that's really fun is, you know, to do community challenges as well. So there's lots of things that you can do to get 2 different customers into a room discussing what they've done and their, you know, their experiences of the product, to, you know, basically, you know, get another side of the story. So, you know, there are lots of things that you can do with community, but it just has to be on your radar, and you need to have a target towards it. Like, this is basically ultimately what I'm going for, you know, once a week or once a day or whatever it might be. And then finally, you know, again, leaning into what we talked about last week, rewarding your customers for being advocates is really, really vital. Everybody wants to be part of a tribe. Everyone wants to be part of something bigger than themselves, especially if it's something they respect and admire, right? So Juliet's Learning Tribe worked really well like this. There are lots of people out there that really are passionately interested in, you know, neuroscience and how that affects learning. And so, you know, they're delighted to be in part of that tribe. So whatever that why is for you, find that why and start, you know, starting off with even 10 people that are, you know, really closely aligned with your values and your bigger why will allow you to create a community. You know, you can have a community of 3. You just got to start somewhere with everybody talking about, you know, what you're interested and passionate in, and ultimately how that dovetails into the product. Okay, you don't need to be getting your customers to sell your product all the time. They could just be talking about the experience of the product or whatever. And remember, you know, it's part of getting them into kind of an advocacy and ambassador type role, that you're leading that conversation. You know, I want to have a conversation about the experience of onboarding. You know, what were the trials and tribulations? What did it feel like for your clients, etc., etc., right? You're going to be guiding them, but you need to ask. Basically, you need to ask. And again, that goes back to what we were talking about last week. So don't just think it's about pushing out content, you know, that is necessarily educational or entertaining. A large part of that should be what we're doing with our community. And when I reflect back, I think that 50% I could do a lot better with. Okay, so just some creative ideas here in terms of, you know, kind of quick wins and community building. We can do a customer spotlight series. So we can identify friends and family. Remember, how we start this off is very much friends and family. So, you know, if in the case of, you know, Iridescent, well, we don't really have any customers. Well, we've got Centrica, but, you know, we are going to be doing friends and family. So, you know, asking people to go on to Zavmo, you know, recording what they're doing, and then we push out, you know, from there, but start somewhere. So we're going to be doing definitely at least once, or, you know, once a week or whatever it is, a customer spotlight. Then we're going to be doing kind of industry challenge. So obviously we can do that very easily with what we're doing with Centrica. Behind the scenes is obviously very easy. And we spent the weekend in Barcelona basically trying to do some behind the scenes glimpses. So that makes us a little bit more interesting, and then obviously collaborative projects, and you've got no idea where they're coming from. But spend some time just thinking what that means to you and your organization, and how you might deliver on those kind of community building content. And then in terms of quick win type content, we want to be looking at, and this is again a problem that I've come into. So I used to take the big long form articles, those chunky pieces of stuff, and try and do videos which were 5 minutes. Well, I mean, nobody listens to 5-minute videos, but trying to get complex ideas into less than a minute is really, really difficult. However, that is where we've got to go. So if I look at my videos on TikTok, you can see that the engagement rate is just not very high, because they're all kind of 5 minutes. So I really get into the weeds and start doing basically long form content on what should be a short platform, which is different from YouTube. Obviously, you can blather on YouTube, and people are more than happy to listen to podcasts and things like that on YouTube, which are 2 hours long or 4 hours long or whatever it is. But for short form media, you want to be looking at clips, and you want to be looking at synthesizing those ideas. So you write a long form blog, and then you put it into Claude, and you're like, hey Claude, can you bring me out some pithy 60-minute comments that I might be able to get up on short form media. So those expertise videos are really good. Oh, Sam, yep, love to hear from you.
Just jumping in on that, what we did a lot with Luxury Locations is we made effectively a long form video on YouTube, and we used Instagram to make almost like a trailer of that video, so that it kind of enticed people to watch the trailer, as it were, to drive them to YouTube. So rather than trying to create a second video, we literally took highlights and bullet points and said, if you want to know more, go to YouTube. Because we found exactly the same thing, that you can't squash 10 minutes of ideas into 35 seconds.
That is a really good point. And what did you do? Basically, the outro screen was,
It was basically go here, like, so it would be like, it was like a trailer. So it was like, we'd say a Q&A type thing. Sam, what are the main things that drive the tourist market? Well, what's really interesting of the tourist market is, the US economy helps it. And then it would sort of tail off and go, see the other 6 points that Sam is about to make.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And then there'd be another thing, and it'd be like, these are the best properties you can buy. And it would just be little clips taken out from the long form, which was a much faster way, rather than going, let's try and do another video. Let's just repurpose this by chopping it up and use it as a lead generator for the second platform. But we watched that 60 seconds much more thoroughly, because it was very much a sales kind of like, bam, bam, bam. It's a trailer for the first video. For the long form video, I should say.
Great, fantastic. And have you got any insights with regards to like views on short form content versus long form content? Did you find that, I don't know, you got more on short form content than long form content, or not really?
Okay, so the difficulty is, and I've spent a lot of time looking at the algorithms. So you have to be careful. And again, with all of this stuff, you're always going to fail somewhere. So basically, you're never going to succeed. So it can be very daunting. You're always going to fail somewhere. I spent a lot of time looking at the algorithms. If you have say a 2-minute video and your drop-off rate is 90% in the first 10 seconds, you then need to look at that video and go, right, okay, it's not working. So basically all the algorithms are looking at, generally just across the board, what they're all looking for is watch time.
Right.
And so in some sense or another, effectively what they're looking for is, are people interested in this content? Yes or no. So if people aren't interested, there's no point you continually spamming people with this content, because no one cares. And the algorithm knows more than everyone else does that no one cares. So you need to be aware, if you may think it's amazing, but if your drop-off rate is massively high, so effectively on YouTube, Instagram, I don't know about TikTok because I've never used it really, but definitely Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, you can see the graph that as it begins, there's a drop-off rate, and then YouTube actually has a lot of metrics on it, and if you can get a 35% watch rate at 75% of the video, that's very good. If you're down at 4% at 50% of the video, then basically no one's watching your video at all. And obviously apparently TikTok as well does that. So effectively that's the thing. So it's worth watching that. And obviously you will get it wrong. Now there's no point necessarily pulling your video. You just need to know, okay, I didn't quite get it right. Maybe I haven't built the community, or maybe I'm targeting the wrong people, etc., etc. But it is important to make sure that you watch those algorithms, because otherwise you are just basically shouting to an empty room. Because the algorithm is not going to help you. So you may be better off going, actually, I'm going to completely change this. And it is a case of kind of, you've just got to do A/B testing, suck it and see, let's just give it a crack. Like, as you say, we don't have a gigantic marketing budget. You can't do all the marketing research. You have to just go, you know what, I'm going to try what I can. And I'm going to gradually adjust it. And hopefully, we'll kind of end up somehow moving towards a position where actually we've got something that's cohesive. And I think we've all done that. You've done that with growth engineering. Steve's done that with AI Steve. I did that with luxury locations. When we first started, we didn't really have a plan. We were just like, let's try and do something, and gradually it morphs into like, this is what we do. We don't do that. Why don't you do it? I don't know. We've just never have, and we just haven't quite got on with it. So that needs to be borne in mind. You can't build Rome in a day. All of this.
And I think also the point that you made about community is really, really important. I think if you just go in and you just start shooting at people, absolutely, Amal, we're just about to come on to that. That is critical. Thank you for raising that. You're one step ahead of the game with that, but you're absolutely right. I mean, the community point, I think that you made is definitely something that I need to do more of, so I'm pushing out videos, I'm pushing out content, but if you have a smaller community, then you might get more people to reshare and like, your content first before pushing it out there. And this is why a community like this, especially, the Andorran businesses of there, we should all be supporting each other, because we're in Andorra and we're selling, in the Andorran market. So even if you start off really small with only sort of 3 or 4 people from this community pushing and sharing each other's content, it will still make a difference if Andorra is our market. But yeah, thanks for that, Sam. Appreciate that. So other ideas that will be fairly easy is process breakdowns. And I think Kieran was talking about that before when he was talking about his more technical videos. So the process of basically doing things, and particularly like people love to find out, let's say they're wanting to do business with growth engineering. They love to find out more about what the onboarding process is. So you can do process breakdowns that are, what's customer onboarding look like? What does customer feedback look like, et cetera, et cetera? How do we review our account, on an annual basis? What's the process? Why do we do it? So these process breakdowns are very interesting to our audience as well. And then the other thing is don't forget, people love that weekly wins. So if something has gone right, it's really worthwhile, entertaining our audience with, I'm so excited, this has finally gone right, we've had a breakthrough, it's finally working, They love to see that enthusiasm. So don't overthink content. Go back to looking at, right, how do I educate, how do I entertain, and make sure that you've got things in line with that. But the key takeaway from the last couple of slides is definitely really by focusing on the community rather than the content, your content might have more impact, right? So just really sort of think about that. Okay, now we come over to this horrible slide, but absolutely vitally important. There's no point pushing content out there, and I'm sorry this slide is just so horrible, but the devil is in the detail with SEO. Now, I am not an SEO subject matter expert, but it is absolutely vital. So do not think that when you are posting your content, whether it is Word or video or TikTok or, whatever it is, these things aren't really, really important. So the first thing is, right, what is the audience searching for? Now, obviously that won't change your golden why, but it might allow you to add in hashtags and, you know, areas that are trending that you could apply to your business, right? So you need to do keyword research. And there are lots and lots of tools out there that will allow you to do keyword research. So without doing keyword research, you really are hoping that, you know, your golden why is what everybody's searching for. Now, they might be looking at for something aligned with your golden why, and it might be very, very close, but because you've slightly missed a word or whatever it is, you might be missing out an audience. So it is worth just stepping back, looking at what's happening in keyword research fundamentals. And again, you know, you can do this with AI, or you can just, you know, go to the kind of Google AdWords, you know, and these tools are free. You don't need to pay for them. So, you know, you can go, you know, people will also ask. So type in what you're doing, and then what around that do people look for. So do not underestimate. Oh, thank you very much, Amal. I very appreciate that. I might reach out myself. In fact, I will reach out, and maybe we could do half a lesson or something like that with your expertise. I think everyone would benefit from that. You're probably thinking now, goodness.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, I'm probably thinking, goodness, why did I offer my services? But I will definitely reach out, and maybe we can get you to, you know, do a bit deeper dive for us on SEO. That would be wonderful. Thank you. So keyword, first of all, do your research. The second thing is meta description optimization. So, you know, think of that as you have to describe what you're posting, right? So, you know, whether that's in LinkedIn and you're describing a summary of the post, or whether the meta description is going in on, you know, video, whatever it is, don't just kind of like throw it up there without the meta description, right? The third thing is if you're online, and obviously using something like WordPress as your website, you know, creator, almost forces you to do the, you know, image alt text. But I mean, this is what I find absolutely fascinating about growth engineering, because we've put image alt text into every single image, and because growth engineering uses images and custom images a lot, we get a huge amount of traffic from the images alone. So don't underestimate making sure every time you put a beautiful image up there, you're also basically putting the alt text image on that as well. And then the other thing is, don't forget to tag in other relevant content, as Sam said, in other areas within your content. So you're driving people to other content that you have produced that is made further down the story. So you've seen, you know, what we say about this topic. This is, you know, some of the wins we've had with our customers, right? So this is really, really basic, and hopefully we will get a session arranged with Amal, and she can give us a bit more depth and insight, because I would certainly like to learn from that. So yeah, that is a quick overview. Horrible slide, but hopefully it gives you an idea of some of the things at a very kind of brute level that we need to be thinking about. The other thing is this local SEO focus. So again, this is not something that I've used in the past, but if I think about Zavmo and local tutors, ensuring that Zavmo has a local focus for where tutoring for kids is got the highest market penetration, you know, we should be lasering in on that. So London Tutors, you know, we should focus that as an SEO element for Zavmo. Because people do want local searches. You know, they don't want to tutor, you know, why compete globally when you can compete in Chichester? Do you know what I mean? So this local focus, I think, is also really, really interesting. The other thing is that if we want our content or our search results to come up, we need a lot of long tail. So thinking creatively about the long tail is a really, really good way of you know, almost bumping into clients in terms of, you know, not going for the blunt big keywords like learning management system or, you know, whatever it is. So thinking in and around what an AI tutor would look like, or a personal study buddy, not just the blunt, description of it, is a really good way of going. So yeah, definitely think about how you can do local SEO focus, because that would be particularly interesting, if we were talking about gin and Andorra, for example, because people, you might tag in a lot of Andorra, or you might tag in Andorra la Vella, you might tag in, or go even smaller than that, or you could go down the botanical route. So you could just keep going and going and going. But this idea of basically leaning into the long tail is, you can build really, really good businesses off the back of long tail keywords. So there are lots of things we can do. Quick wins would be like setting up a Google business profile, adding location to, our website, and don't underestimate local directories. So if there are local directories in your area, then make sure that you are registering with those as well. So again, these are not necessarily something that the large companies would do, but we want to think more creatively, like how do we make that long tail work for us? So, do spend some time researching long tail keywords that you could use, and kind of leaning into that, as opposed to going head to head with the big guys on things like, learning management systems or stuff that they will already be supporting. Now, that's not me advocating for you paying for Google AdWords. That's just me advocating for getting your content into areas that are, slicing and dicing where your market might be. So yeah, definitely look at, oh yeah, Amal, we'd love to hear from you.
Hey there. Well, there is an hack here when it comes to long tail keywords. Just Google your main service to Google, and there is a section where it shows you people also ask questions. Keep open the arrows, okay, and close it back. You will have like so many questions. You can start with that.
We have to have you. We have to have some of you. I will reach out after this session. We definitely need to have, maybe you can do an interactive walkthrough of your best top tips or something like that. I think we would just love that. So thank you very much for, your expertise in advance. I will definitely reach out, because I think we're all very interested in, these tips and tools that we could use. So thank you for that. And yeah, please post in the community as well, so that we know where to go. But I think having a session with you would be wonderful for all of us. So thank you. Okay, so metrics to track. So how do we know we're getting better at what we're doing? Well, obviously our engagement rates should be going up. So, and also the other thing is our community growth rate should be going up. So we should see, more followers, but we should also see more engagement by those followers. And if we can label them, let's say, these are the people that are fascinated about botanicals. So this is my botanicals group of people, or this is my, whatever group of people it might be. By labeling them, we can really lean in and start offering, more and more value to them, and get that community to be tighter and tighter. With community, what we want is stronger, not necessarily bigger. So having a loose community that isn't posting on your, and engaging with you is, it's more important to have a tighter community that are passionate advocates than it is to have a big community that maybe isn't so engaged. And I would definitely put myself in the larger category in terms of, I've got lots of followers, but I'm not sure how engaged they are. So yeah, definitely think about, that. And then obviously you've got, the solid sales stuff, so the conversion metrics, and then, people that are mentioning your brand or you personally, is also really useful to track as well. So in terms of kind of 90-day action plan, I know that you've done some work on your content calendar, but hopefully today we were able just to talk about your content strategy, because the most important thing here is that you do it. And so what I wanted to do in this presentation is just show you some creative ways of how you might get your content to be done more efficiently, so that you can do more of it. Okay. So in terms of the kind of 90-day action plan, remember, we're trying to get a tight community of advocates. That's our ultimate goal, right? We don't want, we don't want to be spending to get everybody kind of who's not necessarily interested in what we're doing. We want to activate the people that really are, will be advocates for us. So do some foundation setting. Think about also how you can grow from friends and family. Okay. I saw a really interesting video the other day by Sam Altman, and he was talking about business consumer applications in the AI space. And he was saying, you just can't build a business consumer, company based on Google AdWords or paid AdWords. You have to start with friends and family. Then you have to start with the next people that you know. Then you need to start with a mailing list that really loves you, because there just will never be enough money in the world to basically, pay for all of your customers through Google AdWords. So I thought that was very interesting in terms of how we all start. We all need to start with this tight friends and family group, and then move out from there, ensuring that friends and family group really do know what you need from them. So what I need from you is I need you to go on to Zavmo, and I need you to play with it. I need you to video it. And if you get 1 or 2 of those, then you've started. Do you know what I mean? So think small before you think big. So that should be in your 90-day action plan. And then final slide here, or final 2 slides, is please do not let, yes, hands up. Go ahead. Love to hear from
Sorry,
you.
I didn't mean to interrupt.
No,
I was just, I suppose being in Andorra, one of the challenges that I've found so far, and obviously we're only just starting our social media following, is what languages to use in Instagram. So far I've been really diligent about doing everything in English and in Catalan. But there was one post, for example, that was too long, where I was, because you only get a certain number of characters, where I was explaining, giving like a really nice spiel about, the product and who we are and what the product is. And it was too long, so I ended up having to repost it twice with the same image, once in English and once in Catalan. And it's really interesting because on Facebook, a man followed me personally on my page, and then I put a post in English, and then he attacked me saying, if you want to be a business in Andorra, then you need to have your posts in all of these different languages. I speak fluent French because I went to the lycée in Andorra, and I replied saying, this is my personal page. Please refer to the Fora page, where you'll see that everything is in English and Catalan, and, before making comments on a public domain that could cause harm, maybe check your facts type thing. But it kind of gave me a bit of an awakening of how, especially I think as an English person in Andorra, you have to be extra careful, because we want the Andorran community, to be at the heart of everything that we do. Sorry, this is a bit long-winded. So I suppose my question is, I don't have the time in the day to put it in French, Spanish, Catalan, and English, and there also isn't physically the space on an Instagram post, obviously depending on how long the caption is. So do we know, is the best thing, general consensus for me to just stick with English and Catalan? And then does Instagram, they generally have a translation function, so if it is somebody in France, they can just click translate and AI translates it for them, so that I don't have to do that work, kind of.
Yeah, I have to say, thinking about what you said, it strikes me that AI Steve might be a good way to go here. So basically you record yourself once and the AI produces it in multiple languages. So that's on Hey Gen. So I think, unfortunately, there's no way of getting around the fact that they're definitely going to want you to speak in those languages. So what you might be better doing is recording it once in English, and then basically through the translator, because it can mimic your voice and it can change the, your mouth. And basically you just have 4 videos going out in the different languages. But I don't know if anyone else has got any thoughts, on that, because I do recognize that would be really tricky. That is not a problem that we have. Sam, what are your thoughts?
Can't hear you, Sam.
Yeah, can't hear you, Sam. Sam, can't hear you. Sam, can't hear you. You need to, thank you.
Sorry, tech issues. I would say, because you've got multi-language and you are going to have people with strong opinions on it, you need to accept that that's just going to be the way it is. And people may go, well, actually, I don't want someone who's, British selling in Andorra, etc. But what we did, which is completely different kind of market, is where we had anything that was contentious, we kept it vague. So effectively, you're not sort of saying we are necessarily this in this camp, we are not necessarily not in that camp. So using something like AI Steve, as it were, as it's been now, named, effectively what you're doing is people could actually end up believing that actually you are French. So they might follow you for a year and be like, yeah, actually she's French. So almost you don't necessarily, you want to lean into certain aspects of it, but other aspects you just don't want to lean into unless that's part of your core brand value of we are these people who've come to Andorra and this is what we're doing. If you see what I mean. So you're sort of going, well, look, if it's going to be contentious, I'm just going to kind of step away from that and just move around it. So you're not going to kind of poke the bear in that respect. If there's Andorrans who are like, we don't want you setting up a business, without including French, then you kind of want to sort of skirt around it a bit, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I suppose the question, because I actually grew up in Andorra, and I speak English and French the same. So I'm kind of lucky that I actually do speak local languages, but it's more just there aren't the hours in the day or the space on an Instagram post to put all 4 languages. So I think obviously English because I think the main business language in the world is still English. So if we want to become a global company, then it has to be English. But everything in Catalan, because at the heart of it, we want to be a Catalan Andorran, company. But if we are also, as when Juliette kind of looked at our case study, France and Spain are going to be our first territories that we expand into. So we need to kind of be taking them into account. And whilst a lot of Spanish people will be able to understand Catalan, a lot of French people won't understand anything. So I just wondered with the function, if anybody else has experience of using a translate function, like sometimes when I'm scrolling Instagram, there'll be a post that's, for example, in, Russian or something, and there's a thing that hits saying translate here, and it might be a dodgy translation, but it's still a translation. So I just didn't know if anybody had an experience of using Instagram, for example, with a translation function and how well that worked. Or
I think the other thing you might struggle with, and again, you probably need to sort of double down and do a bit of research on this, but if you are English, your feed is probably going to be in English, and if you're in Catalan, your feed might be, in Catalan. So the other problem that you might have is that you might get less people, you might just get less people that are Spanish and French because your content is English first. So I think
maybe you need to use the hashtags in that case. Just if you want to go into those communities, then do that extra work to try and get into those communities.
I think so, yeah. And and having somebody from having somebody who is Catalan first or whatever to do the odd video and push that specifically through, so that it does come on people's, Catalan first feed is maybe a better way of doing it, rather than hoping that, your English feed is going to end up on somebody's Catalan feed. But I think you just need to research it. And
okay.
Yeah, Harry's just said that it automatically translates captions into people's default languages. Just if you're doing a video or something like that, it's going to be really tricky because Catalans, are feisty, aren't they, in the best possible way? They've got
and rightly so.
Yes, absolutely.
It's just something trying to think of being international whilst also being local is a bit of a in like 4 different languages.
Well, I mean, do check out Hey Jen, because then you could record it once and push it out into multiple languages. And as I say, it's not that expensive, and it's once you get your head around it, again, if interested, we can definitely get Steve to talk about his experiences with it. But I think it will just allow you to do multiple languages all in one go and then push them out. But yeah, thanks for the question. So yeah, just before we've got 1 minute to go. Progress, not perfection. Okay, as Sam so rightly said, and we were talking over the weekend, you're not going to get it right first time, and everything can be improved. Just start somewhere. Think about educational content. Think about that's a really good point from Amal. So she had a client that had a YouTube channel for each language for the same business. So yeah, I think, that might be the way you have to go. And obviously, Hey Jen would help on that. So yes, start small, but start, and don't be afraid of failure, because at the end of the day, everyone's awkward when they first start off. So that is basically it. And I will reach out to Amal and see if she would very kindly do a workshop for us, hopefully sometime this week on SEO, and we can go from there. So thank you very much. Happy Monday. And lots of great questions today. Yeah, lots and lots of great questions. Questions make the session, I think. Have a great week, and we'll speak to you tomorrow. Thank
See you
you.
tomorrow.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.